Hi, everyone, and welcome to Seirim Cybersecurity Daily Report. Hi, Steven. How are you today?
I'm doing really good, doing really well. Thank you.
So, today we're going to talk about the Nursery cyber attack that we talked at the beginning of October. And we're going to share some news about Qantas cyber attack. Pretty dramatic. Let's dive in. The UK's Metropolitan Police arrested two suspects, both age 17, in Hertfordshire in connection with a ransomware attack targeting a chain of nurseries in London. The suspects were taken into custody of suspicion of blackmail and computer misuse. The targeted organization is Kido International, operating nurseries and preschools trusted by over 15,000 families globally. Hackers claimed they had stolen sensitive data and photos of more than 1,000 children, along with data about their parents, relatives, and staff. Some of the stolen content, photos, and addresses were leaked in the attempt of extort Kido. When extortion demands were not met, the attackers removed the leaked files on October 2nd. So, Kido disclosed that the compromised data was stored via Family, a service used by nurseries to share information and photos with parents. Family insists its infrastructure was never breached and no other customers were affected. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre described the incident as deeply distressing.
It certainly was distressing. One of the worst parts here was that the children's photos were included and other really targeted personal information, such as their addresses and whatnot, right? So my main takeaway was it remains as it was before that data minimization would have been important here. Did they need all the kids' photos stored, all the information collected at one place? They could have segregated that information out better. But other takeaways I'll mention now include that as we see, these hackers that were arrested were 17 years old, right? So what we can know here is that the proliferation of tools for hackers to use is so prevalent. It's so readily available on the dark web for anyone to grab that this increases the risk for everyone. So because they can get their hands on them whenever they want, anyone at any time, that it puts hacking within reach for anyone of any ill intent. It used to be that there was a higher barrier to entry, right? You had to have certain minimum levels of knowledge, but now almost anyone can do it. And that's true because of AI as well. When you have access to AI, the AI can create the malware for you or others. So it grows in there. So as they're called script kiddies, when someone has a lower level of expertise, they can cause a lot of damage. And the damage was quite high here in this case. Now, another takeaway for me that I think is quite important is that refusing to pay the ransom, as the victim, Kido International, did here, that can pay off because the hackers were still in their extortion phase, right? They were calling up the company, harassing them. They were doing everything they could to try to get that money out of them quickly. But to the company's credit or benefit, the authorities caught them in time before any transaction could occur. And so, yay for the company. It might suck for the victims as some data was still leaked, as you mentioned, right? It was good for the company to not have paid the ransom because it paid off in the end. So those are my key takeaways from that one there. I'm sorry, one more. I have to mention this. This also applies in the Qantas result too. Anytime these attacks are occurring and the data is leaked eventually, we all have to know from the personal perspective that there's more information out on the web for these children for the rest of their lives with all the personal information that it will make them more vulnerable to phishing and identity theft, right? So they have to watch out now that if someone calls them up and says, hey, I know all these details about you, makes them sound credible, whatever their cover story is, that it could just be phishing. It probably would be. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So even script kiddies have only basic knowledge about cyber attacks, but they can do a lot of damage. So companies just need to be very careful and try their best to make sure that all is secured. That's true. Okay, so let's talk about the next news. It's about Qantas cyber attack. We talked about it last week, so let's see what happened next. On October 10th, hackers leaked personal information for 5 million Qantas customers on the dark web after a ransom deadline set by cybercriminals passed. The leaked data originated from a Salesforce database that was compromised in a cyber attack in June. The exposed information included email addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth, and frequent flyer numbers, but notably excluded credit card details, financial information, information, passports, or other highly sensitive credentials. The hacker group, called itself Scattered Lapses Hunters, had earlier issued an extortion demands threatening that the stolen data from Qantas and among nearly 40 companies globally would be published if they were not paid. After the deadline lapsed, the group marked Qantas data as leaked, with a thought that the airline should have paid the ransom. Qantas, for its part, emphasized that customer support, vigilance, and cybersecurity strengthening are its top priorities. It had earlier secured a legal injunction via the NSW Supreme Court to impede further release, access, or publication of the data. Meanwhile, Salesforce stated that it would not negotiate with extortionists and claimed that its systems had not been directly compromised in this particular incident.
My takeaway here is that when the companies don't pay the ransom and the hackers follow up as they promised that they would leak it, well, it's going to happen that the data is leaked, right? And so the takeaway is that at some level, the responsibility is going to occur, right? If the company doesn't pay the ransom, then the consequences are going to fall on us as the individuals. It went from a security issue to a privacy issue, whereas now all Qantas's customers are the ones basically paying the bill with their data out there in the dark web. You mentioned that in earlier reporting, passport information was not included, but I read that passport information is now included, passport numbers, right? So there's some real critical data in here, including dates of birth, emails, addresses, full names, and more, right? So that's plenty of information for these people to be, hacked, their identity to be thieved, for identity theft to occur, or to be phished, right? So I think sometimes we could take for granted that, what happens at the company level also affect us at our level as well. Anyone listening to this probably is aware of HiveI'veBeenPwned.com, but it's a great website from Troy Hunt and a service where they help people know if they've been involved in data breaches and if their information has been or is existing in online breaches, right? So you could check there and see if your information is included. It's a great resource if you don't already know it. All right, so that's my takeaway basically, is that all of this information out there on the web, it facilitates credibility during phishing attempts, right? So it's important to train people at your companies that don't fall for a caller or someone who contacts you just because they, quote, know so much, right? Just knowing a lot about you is not a guarantee that they are who they say they are or that they're legitimate or credible. Now, ironically, phishing was related at a past Qantas attack as well. That's how they first got in. So the data comes all around. It was used to phish in the first place, and now they've got more data to do more phishing with. And I would also mention on Qantas's behalf that this is related to the Salesforce attack itself. So it may not have been really Qantas's fault as much as was Salesforce in this case, but since Salesforce won't pay, the information is out there. So those are my takeaways for today.
Thank you very much for your takeaways. And thank you for watching our Cybersecurity Daily Report today. And see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.